The reason you are completely stuck right now, whether that's in your finances, a chronic health issue, or maybe just a completely gridlocked relationship, isn't because you're being ignored by the universe. What if it's because you are actively being protected from yourself?
Right. It's a deeply unsettling question to ask because we're so conditioned to view any kind of friction or, suffering in our lives as a malfunction, like something that needs an immediate external fix.
Yeah, we just want the symptom gone.
Exactly. We want the symptom eradicated. And we rarely pause to consider that the symptom might actually be, a containment protocol for a much deeper, invisible disease.
And that tension right there, that is the entire mission of our deep dive today. We are unpacking the profound and honestly often uncomfortable architecture of how our internal spiritual condition actually dictates our external circumstances.
It's a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And to ground this, think of your life circumstances like the alignment on a car.
Right. I'm with you.
And your spiritual condition is like the chassis, the actual frame. So say you get into a wreck and the frame of your car gets bent. Because of that, your tires are going to wear out unevenly. The car is going to pull hard to the right.
Yeah, it's undrivable.
Right. So you go to the mechanic, you buy 4 brand new, incredibly expensive tires, and you get a perfect wheel alignment. You've fixed the external circumstance.
But you haven't touched the frame.
Exactly. The second you drive that car out of the lot, that invisible bent frame is going to start shredding those new tires all over again. The blessing of the new tires is completely wasted until the underlying structure is pulled back into shape.
That is a perfect analogy because that invisible structure is exactly what we are examining today. The source material for this deep dive breaks down this dynamic by analyzing a very specific ancient narrative. It's the historical account of Jesus healing a paralyzed man. But I want to be clear, we aren't looking at this just as a static religious story.
No, not at all.
We're dissecting it because it contains a revolutionary sequence. It's a literal blueprint for human transformation. The core argument here is that addressing the invisible spiritual reality it's not a secondary step or a nice bonus.
It's the prerequisite.
Yes, it is the absolute non-negotiable prerequisite that must happen before a visible life circumstance can genuinely change.
I love that. And I want to set the scene for this because the physical reality of this narrative is just intense.
Oh, it really is.
So the setting is a house and it's packed wall to wall with people. I mean, the crowd is literally spilling out the doors. They're there for a spectacle, They want to see the supernatural.
Yeah, they're looking for a show.
Right. And into this incredibly dense, chaotic environment, an intervention happens. But the subject of the intervention, this paralyzed man, is completely passive. He's being carried by 4 unnamed men. He's entirely reliant on their physical strength.
And to really grasp the gravity of this, we have to look at the socioeconomic and really the psychological reality of paralysis in the 1st century ancient Near East.
Which was grim, to say the least.
Unbelievably grim. I mean, this is not a world with the Americans with Disabilities Act. There are no social safety nets, no motorized wheelchairs, no government stipends.
No GoFundMe pages.
Exactly. If you were paralyzed, your existence was fundamentally reduced to begging. You were entirely dependent on the charity of a society that often viewed physical deformity as a curse.
Which brings up a massive psychological barrier for the guy on the mat.
Yeah.
Like if you live in that state for years, literally reduced to the dirt, constantly looking up at people, completely stripped of your agency, psychologists would call that learned helplessness.
Right.
Your brain literally rewires itself to stop trying. Your belief that things can change completely atrophies.
Precisely. The psychological toll of that kind of chronic suffering, it often outpaces the physical toll. You reach a point of profound emotional paralysis. You simply do not have the internal metabolic energy to muster up hope anymore.
Wow. Emotional paralysis.
Yeah. And this is where the concept of group faith or collective intervention becomes the critical mechanism in the story, because these 4 men didn't just feel sympathy for him.
Sympathy is cheap?
Sympathy is entirely passive. Sympathy is looking at a beggar and feeling a fleeting sense of sorrow. These men engaged in an aggressive, physically demanding intervention.
And let me play devil's advocate for a second here regarding how we usually talk about friendship today.
Oh, please do.
Because we tend to romanticize this idea of, being there for people. We send a text that says sending good vibes or let me know if you need anything.
Right. Very non-committal.
Very. But let's look at the actual physics of this ancient scene. Carrying a grown adult male who who has zero core strength to assist you is an absolute nightmare. Human beings are dead weight when they are paralyzed.
It's exhausting.
It's so awkward. Your muscles are burning, you are sweating profusely under a Middle Eastern sun, and you are navigating crowded, dusty streets. This isn't sending a supportive text. This is brutal physical labor.
It's the ultimate expression of sweat equity in a relationship.
Sweat equity, yes.
Because true support requires a massive expenditure of personal energy. When an individual's internal belief system has collapsed, the community has to act as an external life support system.
That is such a powerful image.
The narrative highlights a profound dynamic. True spiritual community refuses to let its members simply lay there and atrophy. If you cannot walk, they will carry you. If you cannot believe, they will believe on your behalf.
It's like piggyback faith. You are literally riding on the spiritual and physical momentum of the people around you.
Piggyback faith, exactly.
But that level of intervention inherently forces a confrontation. You can't just quietly carry a grown man through a city and not cause a scene. And this brings us to the actual cost of this kind of community support. It's incredibly disruptive.
Disruption is the perfect word for it, because when these four men finally arrive at the house, they hit a brick wall. The crowd is so dense that the doorway is entirely blocked. There is no physical way to get this paralyzed man through the door.
Okay, stop right there. Because I gotta be honest, if I am one of those four friends, and my shoulders are absolutely screaming in pain, and we finally get to the destination only to find it's at maximum capacity,
They're done.
I am turning around. I am saying, look, buddy, we tried. The fire marshal is going to shut this down. We put in a solid effort. We'll check back tomorrow. That is the logical, socially acceptable response.
It is the socially acceptable response, yeah. But it reveals a superficial level of commitment. The men in this narrative demonstrate a terrifying level of audacity. They completely bypass social convention.
I mean, they went rogue.
Completely. The text describes them carrying this man up the outside stairs of the house, which would have been common in that architectural era, getting up onto the flat roof, and basically beginning a demolition project.
I am still struggling to connect with the sheer brazenness of this. They're tearing apart a stranger's home.
Right above his head.
Right. Like first-century roofs were usually made of wood or beams covered with thatch, packed mud, and sometimes tiles. So they were literally digging through hardened mud and tearing up beams. The homeowner is probably standing inside watching debris fall on his guests. The property damage alone is staggering.
It's massive.
Not to mention the social faux pas of interrupting a highly respected religious teacher mid-sentence. It just seems incredibly disrespectful.
Well, if we evaluate it through the lens of polite society, it is absolutely disrespectful. But that is the mechanism of their intervention. Desperation overriding decorum.
Desperation overriding decorum. I like that.
Why would they take on the legal, financial, and social liability of destroying a roof? Because they recognized a hierarchy of needs. They recognized that the socioeconomic cost of a broken roof was infinitesimally small compared to the spiritual and physical cost of leaving this man in his paralysis.
He saw the bigger picture.
Exactly. They knew precisely where the ultimate solution was, and they refused to let temporary worldly barriers block access to it.
I want to bridge this to how we operate today, because we still seek out interventions when our lives are falling apart, right? But our methodology is completely different.
Oh, so?
Well, when we hit a crisis, financial ruin, a crumbling marriage, a health scare, we immediately look for the person with the biggest network.
Oh, absolutely.
We look for the wealthy uncle, the connected politician, the high-powered lawyer, the specialist with the shiny clinic. We want to entrust our survival to people who have leverage in the material world.
And we seek out that superficial networking because we mistakenly believe our primary problem is circumstantial.
Right. If I'm broke, I just need a check.
If I am sick, I just need a prescription. We gravitate toward people who can offer a material Band-Aid, completely disregarding whether those people have any capacity to address the underlying invisible frame of our lives.
The people tearing up the roof, they didn't just have money or connections.
No.
They had access to the spiritual root. They were willing to bypass the superficial fixes to get this man to the one source that could actually pull the bent chassis back into alignment.
Which, requires a staggering amount of trust from the paralyzed man.
I didn't even think about that.
Think about his physical vulnerability. He is being hoisted up a narrow staircase and then precariously lowered through a jagged hole in a ceiling by ropes.
Terrifying.
If one person loses their grip, he falls and shatters his spine even further. He had to surrender entirely to their process because he trusted their ultimate priority. True friends are deeply concerned with your circumstances, but they prioritize your spiritual condition above your temporary comfort.
Okay, so the dust is literally settling inside the house. You have to imagine the absolute silence in that room. The crowd is staring. The homeowner is probably fuming. This paralyzed man is lying on a mat directly in front of Jesus. Everyone knows exactly what is supposed to happen next.
It's the big moment.
Right. It's the magic trick. It's the grand finale. Jesus is supposed to say, "Be healed, stand up."
But he doesn't.
He doesn't. He throws an absolute curveball that completely shatters the expectations of everyone in the room.
And this is the hinge upon which the entire narrative and our entire analysis today turns. Jesus looks at the man, acknowledges the audacious faith of the friends who lowered him down, and says, "Son, your sins are forgiven."
Hold on. Let's look at this purely objectively, from a human perspective.
Okay.
A man is paralyzed. He is a prisoner in his own body. His friends just destroyed a house to get him medical attention. And the very first thing this teacher says is, "You are morally clear."
It sounds absurd.
It does. If I am bleeding out in an emergency room and the trauma surgeon walks in, looks at me, and says, "Hey, your past mistakes are forgiven," I am suing the hospital for malpractice.
Right.
It sounds dismissive. It almost sounds incredibly cruel to ignore his blindingly obvious physical agony.
It sounds cruel only if you believe the physical agony is the primary disease.
Oh, wow.
What Jesus is doing here is operating as the ultimate diagnostician. He is ignoring the peeling paint on the drywall and walking straight to the invisible leaking pipe. The framework we are analyzing asserts that in this specific case, there is a direct causal correlation between this man's spiritual condition, his sin, and his physical paralysis.
We need to pause here and tread incredibly carefully. I want to spend some real time unpacking this, because this is where a lot of people check out, and rightly so.
It's a very sensitive topic.
It really is. The idea that sickness or suffering is a direct punishment for personal sin, well, it's a foundation of some highly toxic ideologies. You have the prosperity gospel on one side, which implies if you are sick or poor, you just don't have enough faith or you have hidden sin.
Right.
And then you have the concept of karma on the other, suggesting you were simply reaping exactly what you sowed in a one-to-one ratio. If we accept that paradigm across the board, we are basically saying children with leukemia did something to deserve it.
And that is a gross, dangerous misinterpretation of the mechanism at play here. We absolutely must delineate between the general brokenness of the human condition and specific causal consequences.
So the source material clarifies this.
Yes, very carefully. Jesus himself, in other ancient texts, explicitly refuted the idea that all tragedy is tied to personal sin. When asked about a man born blind, he clearly stated it was not because of the man's sin or his parents' sin.
Okay, good. That's a crucial distinction.
The reality is that we live in a fractured, entropic world. Bodies break down, genetics mutate, accidents happen, tragedy falls on the ethical and the unethical alike.
So sometimes a bent frame is just because a drunk driver hit you while you were parked. You did absolutely nothing wrong, but your car is still wrecked.
Precisely. General tribulation is a fact of a fallen world. However, and this is the crucial nuance we cannot ignore, sometimes the frame is bent because you were driving 90 miles an hour the wrong way down a one-way street while heavily intoxicated.
Ah, I see.
In that scenario, the wrecked car is the direct consequence of a behavioral and spiritual failure. The narrative we are studying today indicates that for this specific paralyzed man, his condition was of the latter category. His visible paralysis was the trailing indicator of a profound spiritual misalignment.
Okay, I see where you're going. So Jesus isn't being dismissive of the physical pain. He's actually refusing to practice malpractice. He's refusing to just hand the guy painkillers while the internal bleeding continues. He insists on addressing the spiritual reality first.
It is an order of operations. The divine sequence demands that the primary issue, spiritual health, is reconciled before the secondary issue, physical comfort, is addressed. If we look at the mechanics of this, addressing the spiritual condition first is what actually frees God up to intervene in the physical circumstance.
I am fascinated by that phrase, freeing God up.
It's an interesting way to put it, right?
Yeah, because it implies God is somehow constrained. But if God is omnipotent, why does he need to be freed up? Why can't he just fix both at the same time? Or, I don't know, fix the physical to prove he's good, and then deal with the spiritual later.
Because it is not a constraint of power, it is a constraint of divine character and human free will. Think about the mechanics of human nature. If a parent constantly bails their teenager out of severe credit card debt without ever addressing the teenager's chronic gambling addiction, the parent isn't being loving.
No, they're just an enabler.
Right. The parent is enabling destruction. God's sequence is driven by the fact that he will not facilitate our self-destruction by granting us power or freedom when we lack the spiritual character to steward it.
Man, this applies so far beyond just an individual's health. I'm thinking about the macro level of this.
Yeah.
You look at national politics or massive corporate structures, or even just modern society as a whole.
Oh, it scales up perfectly.
We have this collective mentality where we demand the blessing but reject the aligner. We say, God bless our economy, God bless our country, God give us peace, give us prosperity, while simultaneously building cultural systems that enthusiastically celebrate the very behaviors that cause societal decay.
It's a massive contradiction.
We want the symptoms of the disease eradicated while we just continue to drink the poison.
That is the tragedy of the human condition. We want the supernatural presence to act as a cosmic vending machine. We insert a prayer and we expect a miracle to drop out, completely divorced from any requirement for internal transformation.
But the sequence cannot be bypassed.
It cannot. The spiritual alignment must precede circumstantial breakthrough, because if it doesn't, the breakthrough itself becomes a weapon.
A weapon? Wait, how does a miracle become a weapon?
We find the answer in a chilling follow-up to this narrative. The source material points us to a later event in the Gospel of John, chapter 5, where Jesus heals another man who had been disabled for decades. Later, Jesus finds this man in the temple and delivers a profoundly severe warning. He says, "See, you are well. Sin no more, that nothing worse may happen to you."
That nothing worse may happen to you. I am trying to wrap my head around that threat level. The guy was paralyzed for 38 years. He was trapped on a mat, begging for scraps for 4 decades. What could possibly be worse than that?
What is worse is the spiritual death that results from using a divine gift to fund your own rebellion. Jesus is revealing the terrifying danger of a physical fix devoid of spiritual transformation.
So giving him his legs back without a heart change is dangerous.
Exactly. If the lifestyle outside the will of God is what caused the paralysis in the first place, returning to that lifestyle with a newly healed, fully energized body will only accelerate the destruction.
Let me build on the heart surgery analogy from earlier.
Go for it.
Let's say a guy destroys his heart through decades of chain smoking and a terrible diet. He has a massive coronary event, flatlines, the whole 9 yards. A world-class surgeon brings him back from the brink, performs a miraculous 10-hour quadruple bypass, and gives him a perfectly functioning heart.
A literal new lease on life.
Right. But the patient experiences zero psychological or emotional shift. He feels no gratitude, no desire to change. The literal minute he is discharged, he walks into the parking lot, lights up a cigarette, and drives straight to a fast food drive-thru.
In that scenario, the physical fix was utterly useless. In fact, it was detrimental.
Not exactly, but you see the point. He is just using his newly healed, highly efficient heart to pump poison through his veins with more stamina than before. He's going to kill himself faster because he has a stronger engine to drive him off the cliff.
Which perfectly illustrates why the delay in your circumstances changing is often an act of profound mercy.
Mercy disguised as a delay. Wow, I love that.
It is. If God simply waved a hand and instantly paid off your crushing debt, but you still possess the exact same compulsive spending habits and materialistic worldview, what would happen?
I'd be back in debt in 6 months.
You would accrue double the debt in half the time. If he instantly restored your broken marriage without addressing your deep-seated selfishness and inability to communicate, you would shatter the relationship again, causing even deeper trauma.
Because the frame is still bent.
Yes. The delay in the circumstantial breakthrough is often the necessary incubation period for the spiritual foundation to cure. God is waiting for the chassis to be strong enough to handle the horsepower of the blessing.
But let's go back into that crowded room in the 1st century, because while we have the benefit of hindsight to analyze this, the people standing there watching this go down were absolutely not buying it.
They were highly skeptical.
They're watching a guy on a mat and a teacher who just told him his sins are forgiven. And there's a specific group of highly educated religious scholars, the scribes, sitting there, quietly losing their minds.
Their reaction introduces a fascinating tension regarding human epistemology. You know, how we know what we claim to know. The scribes are sitting there internally reasoning, who is this man speaking blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God alone?
They understood the stakes.
They understand the theological weight of what Jesus just claimed perfectly. Forgiving a wrong done to you is one thing. Forgiving a sin committed against the cosmos, against God, implies you hold divine authority.
And Jesus does the ultimate mic drop. They're thinking these thoughts silently, and Jesus basically reads their minds. He stops and says, "Why are you reasoning in your hearts?"
Which is terrifying in itself.
Right, if a guy just read my internal monologue, I would immediately stop questioning his authority. But then he traps them in a brilliant logic puzzle. He looks at these highly educated scholars and asks, which is easier to say, "Your sins are forgiven," or to say, "Get up and walk."
It is a masterclass in exposing the limits of human perception. Let's break down the architecture of that question. Why, fundamentally, is it easier to say, "Your sins are forgiven"?
Well, because it's completely invisible. It's the ultimate unverifiable claim. If I stand here right now, look at you, and declare with absolute authority, "Your sins are forgiven,"
Yeah.
there is no physical metric to test that.
Right.
No alarm goes off. The temperature in the room doesn't change. Your physical appearance doesn't alter. I can make that massive cosmic claim, turn around, and walk out the door, and no one can definitively prove I'm a fraud. It's totally safe.
Exactly. It requires zero immediate empirical evidence. But the second command, "take up your bed and walk," is fraught with immediate, undeniable risk.
Oh, absolutely. Because if I look at a man whose muscles have been completely atrophied for years, whose nervous system is severed or dead, and I command him to stand up,
Everyone is watching.
the entire room is going to know in about 3 seconds whether I'm holding actual authority or if I'm a complete lunatic. The physical command demands instant, verifiable proof.
And this brings us to the core mechanism of why external breakthroughs happen. Both actions, the forgiveness of cosmic debt and the miraculous regeneration of dead human tissue, require a power that transcends the natural world.
They both require God.
Exactly. Jesus acknowledges the scribes' theology. They are right. Only God can forgive sins. So, to prove that he possesses the invisible, unverifiable authority of God, he leverages the visible, verifiable power of God.
He says, "But so that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins." And then he turns to the paralyzed man. He doesn't even finish his sentence to the scholars.
He just pivots.
He just pivots and says, "Get up, pick up your mat, and go home." And the man does. The muscles fire, the nervous system reconnects. He stands up, picks up the very mat he was carried in on, and walks out through the crowd.
The verifiable physical event serves as the empirical anchor for the invisible spiritual reality, and this radically shifts how we must view success, healing, or any form of breakthrough in our own lives.
This is the part that completely rewired my brain when looking through this material. Because we are so deeply self-centered.
We really are.
When we pray for a breakthrough, when we beg for the cancer to go into remission, or for the bank to approve the loan at the final hour, or for the prodigal child to come home, we think the miracle is entirely about us. We think the goal of the divine intervention is simply to reduce our friction and make us comfortable again.
That is a drastically limited view of divine intent. If we synthesize the narrative, the circumstantial miracle is never an end in itself. It is a utility.
A utility. You aren't just blessed so you can feel better, sleep better, and spend better. You are blessed to become a walking billboard.
The walking billboard, yes.
The breakthrough in your life is engineered to be a visible, undeniable piece of evidence for the people around you who are still skeptical of the invisible reality.
It creates a continuous, self-replicating loop of faith. The source material captures this dynamic perfectly. The individual's faith and the collective faith of their community leads to a public display of power.
But it doesn't stop there.
No, because the purpose of that public sight is to draw the observers back into their own individual faith. The physical is the bait. The spiritual is the hook.
The physical is the bait. Let's just sit with that for a second. That means your restored marriage isn't just so you can have a happy anniversary.
Right.
It's a verifiable beacon to the couple next door whose marriage is falling apart, proving that dead things can come back to life. Your financial turnaround isn't just so you can upgrade your car. It's tangible proof to a watching world that there is a provider who operates outside the standard economic metrics.
When God alters the visible circumstances that people can empirically observe, he is establishing a resume. He is showing them that he has the jurisdiction and the power to deal with the invisible spiritual decay that they cannot see but desperately feel.
So the man leaving the house,
The man walking out of the house with his mat tucked under his arm was no longer just a former paralytic. He was living, breathing proof that the invisible debt of sin could be eradicated.
wow. So bringing this massive ancient framework directly into the present moment for you, the listener, let's audit where you are standing right now.
It's time for some self-reflection.
If you are listening to this and you are feeling completely paralyzed by life, maybe you are trapped in a cycle of debt or a toxic behavioral pattern or a season of profound depression, you need to look at the mechanics of your existence. First, look at your community. Who is holding the corners of your mat?
It is a critical audit. Are you surrounded by superficial connections who merely offer passive sympathy? Or do you have a group of individuals who possess the audacity to carry you when your belief has evaporated?
The roof wreckers.
Yes. People who are willing to disrupt their own lives, tear up a few roofs, and force an intervention to get you to the actual source of healing.
And even more aggressively, you have to audit your own demands. Are you furious with God or the universe or whatever you want to call it because your external circumstances haven't changed?
Are you screaming for a wheel alignment while actively hiding the fact that your frame is bent?
Exactly. Are you demanding a new, healthy heart just so you can sprint back to the very habits that are killing you?
We must accept the non-negotiable divine sequence. We have to surrender the invisible spiritual condition before we can expect a sustainable change in the visible circumstance. We have to give up the poison before we demand the cure.
Which leaves us with a final, somewhat haunting thought for you to mull over. If the entire architecture of a breakthrough is designed so that a public miracle serves as visible proof of a private invisible alignment.
Right.
What if the reason your circumstance hasn't changed yet isn't because you've been forgotten? What if your physical miracle is simply delayed because your spiritual transformation isn't quite ready for an audience?
That's a powerful shift in perspective.
What if God is just waiting for your invisible foundation to be strong enough to actually handle the crushing weight of the public display?